Welcome everyone. I'm really happy to be with you today to share a few ideas around the concept of digital well-being. And just a few days ago, actually, it was around lunchtime on Monday here in Europe, Google suffered a global outage and all the services like Gmail, YouTube, G Suite, they were all down. And that happened literally 10 minutes before I was about to enter an online workshop on digital well-being. So you can just imagine my face when I couldn't access my G slides, my facilitation note on GDoc, Google Jamboard was down. So that wasn't the easiest way to enter a facilitation gig. But one of the skills also we learn as facilitators is to really adapt as well to the circumstances. So luckily, my co-founder and my co-facilitator and I were able to do the workshop, and halfway through, all the services were restored, which really made everything a lot easier. But in those few moments where technology wasn't available to me, and again, I was facilitating online and I needed the technology, there was one thought that kept popping up, which actually is a thought that I had back in the first wave of the coronavirus, back in March, when it was the first lockdowns for everyone around the world, where we were confined and all of a sudden we could only do stuff online. And the thought that kept popping up was, what if on top of a global pandemic, the internet also collapsed? And to be honest, that thought feels very close to a mental image of the end of the world that I have, minus the zombie apocalypse. Now, removing the zombies, it is clear that the internet plays a key role for our lives and our work. It really has transformed everything. And so you can imagine on Monday, just a few seconds after Google went down, Twitter was full of comments from everyone around the world trying to understand what was going on. And I just want to share one, which I found hilarious. This is actually a comment that my co-founder spotted on Twitter. And it is actually someone who adapted Mariah Carey's song, All I Want for Christmas. And I'll also read out loud in case you can't see the slides. This person adapted the song to, I don't want a lot for Christmas. There's just one thing I need. I don't care about the presents underneath the Christmas tree. I just want my GMO back more than you could ever know. Make my wish come true. All I want for Christmas is Google. Yeah, who would have thought that this actually might become a Christmas wish, right? To have access to the internet and to digital technologies. But perhaps you're like, well, this is not really surprising for me at all, right? And here is an interesting number for you. And the number is 1.25 billion years. Now, if you look at the Earth timeline, 1.25 billion years ago is more or less when the first photosynthesis began. Now, that seems like a long time ago, and it is. But also, this number has another meaning, which is the total amount of time that humanity combined will have spent on the internet just in 2020. 1.25 billion years. This is how much time all of us combined have spent using the internet in 2020. And this, by the way, was an estimation done by We Are Social in their annual report called Digital in 2020 that was published at the beginning of 2020. And I bet they didn't factor in COVID-19. So the fact that all of a sudden everyone was working from home, everyone could only interact online. So I wouldn't really be surprised if the total amount of time that actually we spend online is much more than that. So I'm looking forward to reading the new report next year to see actually what their estimation for next year will be. But I don't know how you feel, but when I look at this number, 1.25 billion years, it seems pretty big, right? And my mind is trying to understand, okay, but what does it mean for me? So also in the report, you have the kind of direct translation to how much it means, how much time it is for you. And basically, if you translate this to your lifetime, it means that each of us is spending 40% of our waking life. So that means when we are awake, not counting when we're sleeping, 40% of our waking life using the internet. So what it means is that on average, each internet user is spending 6 hours and 43 minutes online each day, always according to this report. Now, I am probably well above this average if I count the hours that I spend both for work, but also for all my social interactions. And I'm curious to find out what it is for you. So I'm going to ask the team to pull up a poll, and the poll will have this question, which is, on average, how much time do you spend online? And you'll have 4 options: less than 2 hours a day, between 2 and 6 hours, between 6 and 10 hours, and more than 10 hours a day. So you should be able to see the poll, and I'm going to ask you to please answer, and I'm going to give you 15 more seconds. All right, I'm gonna ask the team if they can please close the poll and let's see what is the result. Aha. All right, so you can see the votes. We have actually no one who said so far less than 2 hours a day. And the majority of us is between 6 and 10 hours a day, or even more than 10 hours. So you can see the results. They're maybe not so shocking, but they're really aligned with what I was just sharing now about this data. Now, when it comes to tech and well-being, of course, this year we have to talk about COVID-19, right? So the outbreak of the novel coronavirus has perhaps exacerbated the situation, but for me, it has been evident for a year that digital technologies have become more and more pervasive in our life, and not just life, but also in work, right? And I can speak from my experience, this year with all the lockdowns, I couldn't travel anywhere, I couldn't see my family, couldn't play sports, so I was entirely relying on the internet, on my devices to be able to do anything, right? And this is great, right? I am incredibly grateful to digital technologies, to the internet, to my laptop, don't take it away from me for allowing me to do that. But many people are not so lucky. Many people have lost their jobs, haven't been able to carry out with their work, haven't been able to feel connected, even if just digitally with other people. So, all the gratitude aside, we also have to acknowledge that even if we have had a chance to connect online, there's also another side to digital technologies, which is the fact that it can have a negative impact on our well-being. Now, perhaps, this year you've been worried about, will I be able to pay my rent at the end of the month, because of the pandemic having disrupted your work? But have you thought about how it also affects your own mental well-being? What about emotional resilience when you can only connect with people online and maybe you have to process grief and you can do that just online? Have you thought about, what happens to your brain when it is constantly bombarded by notifications after notifications? Now, of course, it is not just about notifications, right? There are certain, I would say, challenges when it comes to digital well-being. They are a little bit more subtle. And I would like to make an example. Maybe right now you're listening to me and maybe you're checking your email or you're replying to a WhatsApp message, or perhaps you're still cooking your meal or you're just doing something else. And that's okay, right? There's no judgment here. But what you realize is that with the pandemic and with us moving online more and more, we have just been thinking that we can do more with less time. So we start to multitask because we can have all these tabs open, all these things can go on, and we can be more effective. Well, actually, you can't really do that. You can't, because our brain, which is a wonderful, wonderful tool we have, can only focus 100% on one task at one time. So what happens, and here I'm actually quoting an article from the Harvard Business Review that was published earlier on this year. What happens when we switch from task to task is that our brain requires an enormous amount of energy. So we think that we're being smart because we're multitasking. I'm listening to Greta and I'm still writing that email, or perhaps I'm replying to that WhatsApp message. But what we're doing is that actually in the end, we're losing up to 40% in our productive time. 40% for me is quite a big number. So if you are multitasking right now, I invite you to pause for a moment. I invite you to grab a notebook, a sheet of paper, a sticky note, and a pen, and take 15 seconds to draw an emoji that represents how you are in this very moment. And now I cannot see your emoji, but I can show you what I drew. So this is my emoji right now. I am, of course, excited. I am running on adrenaline because I'm speaking to all of you. So this is how I am right now. And even though you cannot show me your emoji, I hope that just this simple action of pausing for a few seconds, of stopping the multitasking, has allowed you to check in with yourself and see, how am I in the here and the now? Now, at this point, you might be wondering, okay, you've been talking about digital well-being, but what is it? Now, some of you might have attended the Social Innovation Summit last year, so you've already heard this. But just for everyone to have shared language, we define digital well-being as creating and consuming a diet, a digital diet, which is varied, which is nutritious, which is balanced, where you can see all the different digital technologies as giving you the nutrients that you need for your mind, for your body, for your heart, and for your soul. So we know that in a diet, we need carbs, we need proteins, sugar, minerals, vitamins, we need all these things. But what happens that when we look at our digital diet, especially during a pandemic, many of us have been consuming a lot of the digital junk food. So that is food that is poor in nutrients, that creates endless cravings and instant gratification. So we want more and more of. So what we want to do when we talk about digital well-being is about thinking, what is the digital food that we're consuming? And what are maybe some of the changes that we need to make to our diet? So perhaps we want to increase certain food which is more nutritious and decrease other food. Importantly, digital well-being is not, it's an individual choice. There's not like a one-size-fits-all digital diet. Each body is unique, so each body needs a particular diet. The same is true for digital well-being. So it's about you really reassessing what you might need. So food metaphor aside, we can think of digital well-being as actually getting the benefits of technology without the unwanted distractions. It's about taking a more active stance in how we relate to digital technologies so that they are serving us, they're serving our well-being, they're serving our goals and our purpose, rather than us being passive recipient where actually they decrease our well-being. Now, enough talking about some of the drawbacks and the challenges. I would like to share a few quick tips to boost your digital well-being, both at work and in life. And I'll share 5. The first one is, as I mentioned, start from mapping your digital diet and then see what changes you might want to make. So you map the digital food you consume, you check what is good, so what is increasing my well-being, and what is not good, so it's decreasing my well-being. And that's how you make changes. So this is one thing you can try. Now, for many of you who are attending loads of online calls and meetings, and very often you're facilitating and moderating many of them, I think you will find the second tip very useful, which is the idea of embracing the 6 C's in online meetings. First, check the tech. Make sure you're comfortable with the platform you're using, you know all the features. Not knowing how to use a platform can create a lot of stress and anxiety, which is totally unnecessary. Second, clarify the purpose. Why are you asking people to dedicate time and energy to you? There's so many things that are requesting our attention and our time that is very important. The purpose should be clear. Be aware of what content you can cut if you run over time, or really go to the less is more. What is the essential content I want to share? Now, the fourth step, the 4th C, is really important because very often it is forgotten. Cultivate connection. As humans, we're a social species. We need connection. So make sure that people have the chance to interact, to engage, also on a human level, not just, as workers, as team members, whatnot. And you can do that with check-ins, and I will go back to this tip in just a moment. And finally, remember to close well. Clarify the next steps, the next actions, and make sure there is closure to your meeting so that people can move on to whatever is next. Now, the 3rd tip is about checking in and checking out regularly. I love check-ins and check-out practices because what they do is that check-ins, they allow someone to arrive, to land into your meeting, into your call. Because before, they were doing other things, so you don't know how they're arriving. So give them a chance to arrive. And checkouts, they allow then people to take off, to then move on to whatever is next. Now, there's loads of ideas for creative check-ins. I really like to be playful. So one is the one that we did with the emoji check-in, where I ask you to please draw an emoji. A similar adaptation is also weather. If you wear a weather report, what weather would you be reporting today? And again, you can ask people to verbalize it also, or to write it down. Another one I love is using Dixit. Some of you might know this. It's a storytelling game. It is beautiful. And what I do is that if I'm with people, I lay out all the cards, or I choose the image online, because you can also find loads of Dixit images online. And you ask people to please pick a card to describe how you are arriving in this call or living in this call. These are really small things that can really make a difference. And finally, there is a link there to a check-in generator. So if you're like, I have no idea what are good check-in questions, there are people who have done that for you. Second last tip, experiment, play, have fun. Online meetings and online interactions, they don't have to be boring. They can be so beautiful, so powerful, so transformative. Icebreakers, energizers, these are all things that are important, but also activities that allow for more flexibility in participants. So what you see here is an image of an activity we do online, which is called a House of Wellbeing, where we have different themed breakout rooms, and people can choose, okay, depending on how I feel today, I want to visit this room and have this type of conversation. And this really allows for more of the serendipity and spontaneity that very often we're missing in online engagements. And last, don't be afraid of disconnecting and detoxing. Sometimes it is just good to take a break from tech. If you are afraid of how to do that, we have on our website over 140 activities to boost individual and team well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being, emotional, spiritual, and digital well-being. So these are some of my favorite ingredients that I hope you can add to your mix, and you can add your own ingredients to boost your digital well-being. Because at the end, all I want for Christmas this year is to make sure that you feel more in control of your digital diet and better equipped to cook really delicious digital meals. Thank you, everyone, and happy holidays.